This is the Dolphin Nautilus CC+. It turns a messy, leaf-covered pool into water I actually want to jump into, while I spend my time doing something other than pushing a manual vacuum around. I would call this a plug-and-play robotic pool cleaner for people like me who deal with regular debris, fine dust, or pollen, and want a low-fuss way to keep a backyard pool looking good. I have a round pool that measures about 20 feet across, and it lives under a canopy of trees. So my water collects everything from leaves to little bits of bark to that thin green film that shows up early in the season. I wanted something that did not require plumbing, booster pumps, or babysitting. This fits that role. The physical design is very practical. The body is compact with a sturdy carry handle that lets me angle it just right as I pull it out. The power supply is a small box with straightforward buttons, which is exactly what I want for a tool I use several times a week. The cable matters a lot in real life. It is a long, roughly 50-foot line with an anti-tangle feature. That sounds like marketing, but in use, I noticed I was not stopping to unwind knots or loops, even when I ran it on back-to-back days. On the cleaner itself, there are top-loading filter compartments. This is a big deal because I never have to flip the machine over and fight with bottom panels. I pop the lid, slide the baskets out, and hose them off. The box I opened included an extra fine filter insert, which has been great for those days when the trees dust the water with tiny particulates. Setup took me less time than uncoiling a garden hose. I placed the power supply somewhere dry and out of splash range, plugged it in, uncoiled the cable along the deck, dropped the cleaner in, and hit the start button. That was it. No apps, no pairing, no reading a long manual. The first run, I watched it for a bit just to see how it behaved. It glided off the floor, climbed walls, and traced a pattern that did not look random. It would go up the wall, reach toward the waterline, scrub, then push off and move to another area. After roughly an hour, I could already see a difference in the way the bottom looked. The patchy green spots were fading, and the corners that usually trap dirt were noticeably cleaner. Performance is what sold me. Suction has been strong enough to pick up wet leaves and the gritty dust that sneaks through the skimmer. When I run the coarse filter, it collects the big stuff and keeps the flow high. When I swap to the fine media filter, it grabs sand-like particles and pollen so the water looks clearer. The scrubbing brushes matter more than I expected. I could actually see faint lines on the walls where it had gone up and brushed away the film near the waterline. It does not erase every stain or etched mark, but it keeps the film from becoming a problem. I have a vinyl liner, and the brushes have been gentle and did not leave scuffs. In day-to-day use, the cycle feels fast enough that I can drop it in, go do yard work, and come back to a noticeably cleaner pool. I have had times when I only had 30 minutes before people came over. I started a short run, skimmed a few surface leaves by hand, and by the time I finished setting out towels, the bottom looked presentable. On a full run, it covers the floor thoroughly and hits most of the walls. It occasionally misses a tight corner or the angled transition where the wall meets the floor, but the overall pattern is consistent enough that a second run later in the week takes care of that. Real-world mess is what I care about, not spotless lab testing. After a windy afternoon, my water had leaves, twigs, and some flower petals. I set the cleaner in with the coarse filter and came back about an hour later. The basket was already holding a dense mat of leaves. I rinsed it, swapped to the fine filter, and did another run to catch the silt that was left behind. During peak pollen days, I learned to start with the fine filter right away. It captures that yellow dust that otherwise ends up on the steps and along the shallow ledge. After a heavy rain, the pool had that green cast from early algae, and the Nautilus kept it from turning into a scrub brush weekend. The brushes cut into the film, and the filter held the residue. A little chemistry tune-up on my end, and the water bounced back quickly. One thing I noticed about climbing is that it handles my walls confidently and reaches up close to the waterline. It does not always scrub the very top edge where oils collect, so I still take a manual brush to that strip every so often. Stairs are hit or miss for any robot, and this one is no different. It can ride up and bump against the bottom step, but will not detail a full staircase. For me, That is a small trade-off compared to what it does on the main surfaces. Lifting it out is the one moment that reminds me I am dealing with pool gear. Dry, it is around the weight of a small toolbox, maybe 16 to 18 pounds. When it is full of water, the first few seconds feel more like 40 pounds. I pull it straight up by the handle, hold it just above the surface, and let most of the water drain out before bringing it onto the deck. That quick pause makes a big difference. Once it is on the deck, I pop the lid and empty the filters. The baskets slide out easily, the latches are simple, and the grids rinse clean under a regular hose. It does not feel like a chore, which is important since I do it several times a week during the heavy debris season. There are a few smart touches that genuinely help. The anti-tangle cable means I have not had to stop mid-run to unknot anything. The top-loading filters save minutes and spare my back. The way it maps the pool is not flashy, but it clearly adapts because it does not do the same loop over and over. It decides where to go based on what it already covered. I also appreciate that there is no finicky app or complicated setup. I press a button and it goes. That is exactly the level of control I prefer for something that just needs to work when I want a clean swim. A typical use case for me is a quick morning clean. I roll out, drop the Nautilus in the deep end, press start, and make coffee. By the time I finish coffee and answer a few emails, I check the pool and it looks like I spent an hour with a manual vacuum. If I know a storm is coming, I run it ahead of time to start with a clean baseline. After the wind, I do another pass to grab the new leaves and grit. On weekends, I swap in the fine filters and let it do a more thorough polish while I handle yard work. It just quietly gets the job done. There are a few quirks to be aware of. I learned to unspool the cable along the length of the deck before each run. That helps it move freely and reach every corner of my round pool. I also keep the power supply well away from splash, because it is an electronic box and I want it to last. The cleaner sometimes leaves a little line of very fine silt right along the deepest part, especially after a serious storm. A second run with the fine filters has cleared that every time. None of these are deal breakers, just honest details from regular use. What makes this worth keeping for me is not a single headline feature. It is the sum of small, reliable things that remove friction. The long cable that actually resists tangles, the way it climbs and scrubs so I am not brushing walls every other day, the filters that swap in seconds, and the fact that I can choose between coarse and fine based on what is floating around that week. The consistent cleaning pattern that feels efficient rather than random, and the ease of setup, which means I am using it more often because it is not a hassle. If someone is managing a small to medium backyard pool, especially one that sits under trees or gets regular dust and pollen, this robotic cleaner makes weekly maintenance manageable. It does not replace every task. I still brush the top inch near the waterline occasionally, and I still skim a few leaves on the surface if I am in a rush. But it has dramatically reduced how often I pull out the manual vacuum, and it keeps the water inviting with a lot less effort from me. I am glad I went with the Dolphin Nautilus CC Plus because it has been predictable, thorough for everyday debris, and easy to live with. I reach for it without thinking, which is the best sign that a tool is doing its job. If a pool is larger, has very complex shapes, or needs constant surface skimming, a different setup might make sense. For a straightforward backyard pool that collects what nature drops into it, this has been the right fit. Check the comments of this video for a link to see the current pricing of the Dolphin Nautilus CC Plus. Thank you for watching.